How's it going, everyone? Jiivita here with an overview for release 119. This adds a lot of really cool things and rebalances quite a few other things that have been long overdue for it. But just to give a quick rundown of what's in this patch, we got the brand new Exoworlds. These worlds come and go from the universe. There are essentially mid to high level worlds that only stick around for a short period of time before moving off to never be seen from again. So like I said, these can be mid-level, so maybe like 4 and 5 upwards, but this also adds at least level 7 worlds and potentially all the way up to level 8 worlds, maybe in a future update. On the testing servers, I only got a chance to see level 7 worlds, but these new really high level worlds will have the special materials such as Blink, Umbrus, and Rift. Umbrus was previously referred to as dark matter, but they changed the name to Umbrus for, I think, clarity, maybe for like translation to other languages. But moving along, this patch also touches on experience balance across basically exploring, resource gathering, as well as crafting, and many of the changes are pretty awesome. And then the prestige system is getting some TLC with basically balancing out and making the system a little bit less exploitable, or at least rewarding variation much more highly than it ever has previously. And probably one of my favorite additions is that now the maximum skill page count is 5, which is up from 3. So now if you've already got your first 3 skill pages fully filled out, you can start working on your 4th and 5th, and that's just going to open up a lot of possibilities, particularly for players that prefer to have essentially one unified identity. Like they want to just be on one character to do all the things that they need. You can just about do everything on one character with 5 skill pages. Or you could even take, say, a miner and just make several mining specs that are used in very particular situations for a highly specialized build without having to constantly move points around or reset your skill page. So it's going to be a really nice addition, I believe. But getting down to business, so let's take a closer look at Exoworlds. Unfortunately, I missed my opportunity to get some footage of the Exoworlds. The patch notes did mention that there'd be a continuous stream of Exoworlds for mid to high level planets, but sadly on the testing servers it seemed like we only got one set of worlds. They stuck around for, it was something like 4 to 5 days, and then they moved on, and we didn't seem to really get another set. So I don't know what was going on with that, or they just only spawned one set for the testing servers. But what I can say is I did a fair amount of exploring on them. They seem to be a very nice step up from tier 6 worlds, and both just kind of how extreme the terrain was and the environmental hazards, as well as the progression of the creatures themselves and the blocks. So naturally the blocks have more HP, the creatures are stronger, they have more HP. Not to mention the level 7 worlds, they're special, so they have not just the standard elemental creatures, but the creatures aligned with the new special materials. So the 2 worlds that I was able to explore were Rift worlds, and each of the new special resources are aligned to, or a combination of, 2 elements. If you're using a weapon forged out of these materials, it will channel whichever element will do the most damage to your target, so that is going to be really nice. But to give a quick rundown, Rift will channel both Shock and Chill, Blink will channel Blast and Burn, and then finally Umbrus will channel Corrosion and Toxin. So if you notice, each one of those materials will channel elements that are found on the same planet. So Blink, which is a swift tool or weapon, will actually channel both Blast and Burn, which those are always found together on the same planet. So if you're on a Blast planet, you'll also find rubies in addition to diamonds. If you're on a Burn planet, it's the exact opposite. You'll find diamonds as well as rubies. So that's kind of an easy way to remember it. It's kind of curious that you take a heavy trait and a balanced trait, and it then makes Blink, which is a swift trait. So it's a little bit interesting how those kind of combine together, but it makes perfect sense when you look at it from the standpoint of the gem combinations that are found on the same planet. But coming back to the Exoworlds that are tier 7 and higher, so if you come across a blink creature, that means that they can actually apply debuffs from both of those elements simultaneously, making them even more deadly. Not to mention elemental creatures in general have gotten quite a bit of buff, not just on the Exoworlds but across the board. And then once you start adding those exotic buffs to either give them more HP, speed, etc., they just become all the more deadly. So to kind of balance it out a little bit better, exotic creatures are less likely to spawn on lower level planets. Again, exotic creatures are the ones that have the special buffs that make them faster or more HP, etc. So the lower level planets will be a bit more friendly to newer players while still being more dangerous on the higher level planets. Another cool thing for lower level or new beginning players is that wild stocks on the lower level planets will only charge once, or the lower tier wild stock will only charge once. This will kind of give players a bit of a breather to kind of learn how wild stock work before they start doing the multi charges, because back in early access they used to only do one charge, and once you kind of learned the trick, they were really quite easy to defeat, even the high level ones. But once they start doing that multi-charge, it's a kind of a whole different ball game of learning how to dodge that as well. So that'll be a nice addition for new players. And as you might expect, the higher level worlds have more dangerous atmospheres, so the tier 7 worlds required you to max out the atmosphere protection for that category, so you needed all 5 points into there. For the level 8 worlds, you would actually need greater than what is possible to attain from skills alone. So for tier 8 worlds, you'll be forced to take a combination of both food and skills to be able to survive there. Another interesting thing is that 30 minutes before an exoworld leaves the universe, so to speak, the atmosphere level will gradually step up to basically where it'll be impossible to survive there without, basically just dying over and over. Certainly you'll be able to, at least on level 7 worlds, eat better and better environmental protection foods to be able to stay there a little bit longer, but eventually you'll get booted to the sanctum if you manage to stay until the world completely disappears. But of course, remember that you can always return home for free. Another key characteristic of Exoworlds is that they cannot be beaconed in any way, shape, or form. So you can't place campfires, you cannot place beacons. This has the added effect that you also can't place storage blocks or portals or anything like that. So if you want to explore these new worlds, you either need to, get your warp augment, obtain a location and open up a warp to that planet, or get with somebody else and essentially carpool to travel to these new worlds. If you want to make the most out of your coin investment to warping to these new planets, you could even say open up a warp, take your main character through, and then quickly log on to another character that's in the same location. And since that warp stays open for 1 minute, you could potentially get 2, maybe even 3 of your characters through that portal, just so you can bring back just that much more resources for the same amount of coins. And certainly if you're in a guild, you could set up basically taxis or bus loads of players to go through all at the same time to spread out that expense and make it overall cheaper and bring back more exotic resources per trip, so to speak. So a really kind of interesting feature to maybe encourage players to collaborate with their gathering adventures. Another characteristic of Exoworlds is that they have no world regeneration whatsoever. So any changes that are made are permanent for as long as that Exoworld is there. That means no resources will ever respawn. So once all that blink, dark matter, or rift, or umbrous, not dark matter, is mined out, then that's it for that planet. You can use regeneration bombs to regenerate the basic terrain, but none of the embedded resources in the blocks will come back. So that'll be kind of interesting to see what kind of effects that has on the value of these commodities, since they'll essentially truly be a limited supply, at least until the next planet comes out. So they say there's going to be a constant supply of these worlds coming and going. However, that doesn't mean that there's always going to be, say, a Blink world available, or an Umbrous world, or a Rift world, etc., etc. So that'll be really kind of interesting to see how this affects these commodities. And I could even see, like, if there's a stretch where, say, Blink is unavailable, it would be, you know, kind of interesting to try to build up a stockpile in anticipation of such an event happening, and then, you know, basically making a tidy profit of, you know, waiting until there's a scarcity to put your product on the market. And naturally, you can use these exotic materials to make not only really powerful tools, equipment, and weapons, such as grapples, sling bows, hammers, etc., but each essentially refined version of this material is placeable as a building material. So you'll get it essentially as a gem form. You won't be able to do anything with that, but then you'll first compact it and you'll be able to use that for buildings. You'll then refine it. Those are also placeable blocks. And then finally, you can make decorative versions of these materials for a super advanced, you know, high prestige building type material. Fortunately, I'm not sure how much prestige each block is worth, but I have to imagine it's a sizable amount. Another really cool thing is that compacted, refined, and even decorative versions of Oort stone are now added. So Oort stone, in addition to being portal fuel, will actually be a building material as well. And while we're talking about portal fuel and Oort shards, there's actually going to be a new, more advanced form of portal fuel. It's still going to be made from Oort shards, but it'll be crafted from these Oort shards with a new drop called meteorite ichor. So it says that these will be collected from meteorites on lucent worlds, which I'm not 100% sure what that means. The new Exoworlds do have this kind of glowing effect on them, as well as a really crazy orbit. So maybe that's what they mean, that these Exoworlds will be essentially the source of the more advanced portal fuel. I don't know if it's truly going to be a more efficient portal fuel, but it will allow you to fuel a regular portal or a given size portal for up to 3 times longer than you previously would be able to. So those really large portals that have to be fueled every few days, you'll be able to fuel them every few weeks with this new fuel. So that will be a huge quality of life, especially if it'll allow you to stretch out your portal fuel even longer. But since it will need this new resource, you may have to kind of balance, like, is that extra fuel duration or the extra efficiency is worth the expense of using this new resource? That sounds like, at least at first, will be quite valuable, since I imagine just a few people will want to get their hands on it. So coming back to Exoworlds, I think we've covered just about everything, at least in a roundabout way. As far as finding these new exotic resources, I was able to complete a number of kind of level 1 and 2 meteorites, and you do get the special materials from those meteorites if you're on those higher level planets. So you can do some of those meteorites to get at least your first couple to maybe put into an atlas to help you find them. You can also go to the knowledge tree and they'll give you the basic information on how to find them. Essentially, all of them seem to be associated with mountains, and with 1 being high and 2 being found way down deep. So if you're already used to mining gems, it sounds like it'll be a fairly similar experience, just potentially a little bit more rare. Moving along to the experience rebalancing, so this touches crafting, surface resources, as well as exploration. So they finally re-enabled essentially the scaling, discovering zone experience. So the first zone that you discover will give you 50 experience, and then every zone after that will progressively give you 50 experience on top of what you were getting for the last one. So if you completely explore a planet with 50 regions, which are all the basic worlds we already have, that will give you a total of 63,750 experience. If you discover all the regions on an exo world, which only have 35 regions, so they are a little bit smaller, that will give you 31,500 experience. So that is a huge buff to basically exploration experience. It's not exactly going to be earth-shattering, however, all of this should be enacted retroactively. So if you've already discovered all of the regions on all of the planets, you should be due for a fairly sizable chunk of experience coming your way. Moving on to the surface resources, many of the surface resources have gotten a decent buff to the amount of experience that they give. So collecting surface resources should be a much more rewarding experience, at least in the, well, experience department. But some of them are fairly kind of subtle. So like Desert Sword, you were getting 16 experience, now you'll be getting 20. So not a huge difference there. However, or say like the Traveler's Perches, before you were only getting 32 experience, now you'll get upwards of 160 experience. So that is a significant jump there. So basically the rarer surface resources will give you much more experience. The more common surface resources, not so much, but will still give you probably a little bit more experience. There are a couple of exceptions, at least the patch notes list Rosetic Nox giving 22 experience previously, in that they'll now give, again, 22 experience. So I'm not sure if that was maybe a typo or if it was truly intended to not give any additional experience. But should be a really nice addition to this next change of how teaching pies work. So teaching pies were getting a little bit abused because essentially players only use them for activities that was really experience dense. So either like queue up a whole bunch of crafting tables with stone, eat a teaching pie, log out to preserve the duration, to then come back and get massive amount of experience all at once. Or say go mining with an AoE hammer where you're just constantly getting experience throughout that 30 to 45 minute buff. Now teaching pies work in the way that you get bonus experience for a set amount of experience. So there's no longer a duration for the teaching foods. They last indefinitely until you acquire 70,000 experience. The different ranks of food will give you anywhere from 10, 20, 50, or even 100% more experience for that 70,000 experience. So if you're using a teaching pie, that doubles your experience gain, so you'll actually be getting 140 experience for your trouble, so to speak, whereas say if you're using the lowest teaching food that only gives you 10% experience, that'll be giving you 77,000 experience for gaining that 70,000 experience. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit kind of hard to wrap your head around it at first. It's essentially a reverse defeat and penalty. And then finally on the crafting side of the experience rebalance, many of the crafting recipes have been tweaked ever so slightly to more accurately reward you for the amount of trouble that you have to go through. So many of these are really minor, like silver alloy, you were getting 10 experience, now you're getting 11. So nothing earth-shattering there. There's some recipes that actually got nerfed, like Ancient Vital Essence was giving you 6 experience from the small fossils, now you only get 4 experience from the small fossils. Apparently the medium and large fossils weren't affected. Probably the most notable change, however, was that stone, at least originally, was going to award no experience whatsoever. Just a few people got a little bit upset about this. I wasn't thrilled about it. I was mostly concerned of like, well, what is the value of stone anyway? Because currently I really only pick up stone just so I can turn it into experience, particularly for power leveling low level characters. With stone not awarding any experience whatsoever, I basically didn't want to pick it up at all. However, my concerns were mostly alleviated when I heard the plans to make stone an instant craft, as well as the addition of essentially an economy machine, or what's being dubbed an economy machine, that would allow you to dump at least basic resources into it to convert them into coin. So that actually made me quite happy. I'd a lot rather take all of my stone and turn it into coin, however little coin that might actually be. This will do a number of things. Not only will it give players, particularly new players, a new way to get coin reliably, but it will also basically set a basic or a base value for these resources. So in other words, like say you can't even sell rock for 1 coin a piece right now, bar a few little exceptions. But with the economy machine, that sets a bottom to the price. So essentially, it's like you either sell it for higher than that, or you just throw it in the economy machine. Either way, you're still getting coin for those resources. Another cool thing is that essentially the buy baskets, shop stands will be able to list prices for sub coin values, or some kind of like decimal point essentially. So if the rock is truly only worth, say, half a coin, you'll actually be able to buy and trade through the shop stands for those values. So that will be exceptionally nice. However, those changes won't make it into this patch. They're going to be reserved for either next patch or the one after that. So it's on the way, not quite here yet. However, due to all the controversy over the stone not giving any experience, it's now been changed to give 1 experience per stone instead of 0. So it's kind of, at least I feel, a happy middle ground. We'll still get the economy machine, so if you wanted to convert all that rock into coin rather than experience, that's an option, but you'll still be able to at least get some experience from crafting your stone. That will help out new players. But then also with the changes to the experience foods, it'll be much less, at least efficient, to try to use the teaching foods in conjunction with crafting stone in order to get massive amounts of experience. Certainly you could set up, like groupings of crafting tables, eat a pie, approach those, which would then consume the pie, and then essentially eat a next one before going on to the next station. And while we're talking about all of this experience, as I said at the beginning of the video, we're now getting 2 additional skill pages at our disposal. Naturally, you'll still have to buy them from the exchange, but if you have enough skill points to actually fill out those 5 skill pages, I have to think you have the qubits laying around to be able to buy those 2 extra pages, especially since they're only 600 a piece. That's leveling up twice once you hit level 50. Not a hard thing to do. So that will be a really nice addition. You'll be able to do practically everything all in one character, or you could even make like some super specialized characters. I could see making a miner that has a spec essentially for each atmosphere type. That would allow you to free up upwards of 10 points for extra quality of life skills. So maybe you want that jump distance or the air jump epic to be able to have a little bit more maneuverability, or maybe you want a little bit extra agility so you can move faster. It certainly opens up quite a few options. It might be a little bit inconvenient for traveling through portal hubs if you're going through all those atmospheres, and not every spec has all of the atmospheric protection skills, but I could see having, say, the 3 mining specs, each one specializing in a certain atmosphere, and then having a 4th spec that's essentially a travel spec that does have all those skills, so you could freely travel around and still be able to see where you're going. Once you get to your mining location, you could then switch to your mining spec. The only thing is that once you're done mining, you would have to remember to switch back to your travel spec so that you wouldn't run into the cooldown of, the 15-minute cooldown between switching skill pages. So the amount of customization and specialization that 5 skill pages brings to the game is really exciting, at least to me. And then finally, the last major change in this patch is essentially a complete rebalance / maybe kind of rework of the prestige system. So try to give you just kind of the bullet points here because it's kind of complex of how it works. But first off, all blocks will give prestige, period. So what that means is all that dirt, rock, leaves, and logs or trunks will actually give you prestige now. However, as you might imagine, there will be diminishing returns. So basically the new system tries to combat like the gleam towers, or spamming one particular block to a really exaggerated effect. So after a certain point, if you place too much of a particular block type, like say gleam or machined iron, eventually the return on that investment will become less and less, to all the way to the point that it may not increase prestige at all. The cool thing is that it will never decrease your prestige. So I heard a couple of instances where the prestige system, or the old prestige system, was gamed to the point that if you added blocks that changed up the bonuses a little bit, you could actually end up losing prestige instead of either not affecting it or increasing the prestige. So I never ran into that myself, but if you're doing something like building entire towers out of gleam, I could certainly see how you could run into issues such as that. So in addition to all the prestige values for individual blocks being balanced to better represent how much effort went into actually acquiring or making those blocks, the system has also been updated to better account for variation, or rather encourage variation. So like I said, if you just spam the same block over and over, eventually it will have no effect until you start adding other blocks to kind of mix it up, give it a little bit more variety. Another really cool thing is that the system now accounts for chisel variety as well. So if you use the same chisel shape over and over and over, it's going to hit that same diminishing returns. So if you want to get up your chisel bonus, so to speak, you'll need to incorporate a wide range of chiseled shapes to further the prestige of the beacon. So I think that covers essentially the quick and dirty bullet points of how the new prestige system will work. Certainly those very large gleam towers that are just solid gleam, or even if they're coated in some other block to kind of hide the gleam, those builds, as you might imagine from hearing the description, will probably see a decent reduction in prestige moving forward into the new patch, whereas other more varied builds, particularly builds that use a lot of natural blocks, should see a very nice increase. Okay, well, I think that covers all the highlights in release 219. I'm really excited for this patch, and unfortunately I work the next 2 days, so I'll have to wait a little bit to dive into the live version and actually get to explore it, but really nice changes. Naturally, there are things that I just don't have the time to cover, so be sure to check the description for a link to the official patch notes. There's been a number of things added to the UI and engine, particularly like you look at planets, and if you don't have the skills to be able to reach that planet using warps, it'll be flashing red, and then there's all sorts of other little indicators for like Exoworlds to let you know how long those are going to be around, what level they are, etc, etc. So should be all fairly straightforward. Another quality of life addition to the user interface is now if you're building in an area that has a lot of snow that covers up the ground and hides what blocks are there, you can now turn on beacon mode to essentially remove the effect while you're building. So that will be quite nice. But anyway, this was Jiivita. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and if there's anything you didn't like, please let me know down below. Also, if you like my channel and want to get cool perks, check out my Patreon page. Until next time, peace.